Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. Beneath the dim, golden light of the Astronomican, humanity clings to its galactic dominion like a drowning man to driftwood. The Imperium of man, for all its vastness, is not the galaxy. It is merely the part lit by a dying star's last scream. Beyond that, there is only shadow, the cold silence of the unknown. And in that silence, there may be things that watch, wait, or have already forgotten us. We tell ourselves we are masters of a million worlds, but our maps fade into uncertainty at their edges. The Emperor's light stretches far, but not far enough. Beyond its reach lies the abyss, and no one knows what fills it. We call it the edge, not a wall or a border, not something made or meant, but a thinning, a fraying of certainty where direction loses meaning and reality turns soft. No astropath can see it, no scout can mark it. The navigators feel it not as a line, but as a silence, a creeping pressure. And still, some look outward and yearn, not just for glory or conquest, but for something deeper, a need to know what lies past the last whisper of light. There is danger in that hunger, but there is also wonder. The Astronomican is not merely a beacon, it is a miracle of impossible scale, a fire lit by sacrifice and sustained by agony. It is the psychic lighthouse of the Imperium, a vast column of warp energy projected from Terra itself, fueled by the Emperor's shattered godlike mind and tended by the doomed souls of 10,000 psychers consumed daily in ritual death. Through this immense radiance, the navigators guide ships across the roiling madness of the warp, turning the infinite terror of interstellar travel into something tolerable, if only barely. Without it, warp travel would be blind suicide, and the Imperium would collapse into splintered isolation in mere generations. But the Astronomican is not infinite. Its light reaches across a fraction of the galaxy, and even that fluctuates. In stable times, its reach may encompass nearly half the galactic disk, a dome of psychic illumination centered on holy Terra. Yet during storms, wars, or moments of immense trauma, like the birth of the Great Rift, its reach falters. Whole sectors flicker in and out of navigational stability. For those within the Imperium, the Astronomican is taken as a given, like gravity or breath. But for those near its edge, it is a trembling hope, a barely audible song in a cacophony of screams. The light is not seen by the eyes, it is felt in the warp, interpreted through the warp eyes of navigator houses, who describe it as a blazing sigil in the dark, a constant point in a storm of madness. Without it, they are lost. Entire dynasties of navigators have centered their lives, their rituals, even their breeding programs around this one psychic signal. That it has endured for 10,000 years is a marvel. That it could vanish at any moment is a terror rarely voiced aloud. The Astronomican's very existence is both an awe-inspiring act of faith and an indictment of the Imperium's fragility. Everything, communication, supply lines, wars, trade, even faith itself is predicated on its survival. In this way, the Imperium is not a nation of planets, but a network of faith lines tied to a single, flickering flame. It is a lighthouse built on the corpse of a god, illuminating a sea full of monsters. And like any lighthouse, its light does not push back the dark. It merely marks the places where the dark begins. In the early days of the Great Crusade, the Astronomican was newly born, still growing in reach. The Emperor himself tended its core, and its light surged outward in tandem with his armies. As the Crusade expanded, so too did the edges of navigable space. But now in the age of Imperium, the light is no longer expanding. It is dimming, fraying, and flickering, slowly, inexorably. Astropaths speak of growing static, navigators whisper of strange distortions. And the Adeptus Astronomica, sworn to maintain the beacon, conceal their fears behind increasingly complex rituals and thicker curtains of secrecy. Perhaps most disturbing is the realization that this beacon, this single point of hope, was never meant to last forever. The Emperor's interment upon the Golden Throne was not the intended end. It was a compromise, a desperate act to preserve what could be salvaged. The Astronomican was supposed to be a beginning, not a crutch. Yet here we are, 10,000 years later, clinging to a psychic pyre whose cost grows steeper with every passing year. Its flame is fed by billions of lives, its mechanisms by ancient technology no longer understood, and its function by doctrines of faith masquerading as science. And still, the Imperium endures. Entire sectors rise and fall within the beam's reach. Campaigns are waged to reconnect wayward systems, not for conquest but to bring them back into the light. And on the fringe, where the signal fades to a whisper, colonies live in uncertainty, measuring time in pulse strengths and wondering which day the light will fail. For them, the Astronomican is not just a tool, it is a god's heartbeat. And when that heartbeat stops, so too does everything else. At the farthest reach of Imperial maps, where ink fades into parchment and certainty gives way to conjecture, lies the edge, the final boundary of the Astronomican's illumination. Here, navigation becomes more art than science, more prayer than calculation. For the navigators who brave these twilight zones, the beacon appears fractured, flickering, or distorted, as if seen through a cracked lens. They speak in hushed tones of false paths and ghost lights, of feeling the Emperor's gaze slip away, leaving only a cold emptiness behind. It is not a wall but a gradual dissolution, a bleeding out of orientation, where systems begin to drift into ambiguity. Within the boundaries of the Astronomican's full strength, travel is hazardous but possible. Routes are charted, passage is relatively stable, and the dangers are predictable. Warp storms, demonic bleed, hostile xenos. But at the edge, those known horrors become unmoored from time and space. The line between possible and impossible blurs. Ships will leave port with clear coordinates and simply never arrive. Others stumble through months of silence only to reappear years later, maddened, aged beyond reason, or bearing passengers who are no longer truly human. The scale of the Astronomican's reach is immense, yet incomplete. It is said that in ideal conditions, it can extend up to 50,000 light-years in radius, nearly half the diameter of the galaxy. But the galaxy is not uniform. Warp conditions vary wildly across space. Some regions near Terra are riddled with turbulence, while far-off systems bask in temporary clarity. It is not only distance that determines visibility, but the psychic climate of the warp itself. The Maelstrom and the Eye of Terror are both technically within range of the Astronomican, yet utterly impassable. Conversely, there are distant fringes where the light somehow lingers, fragments of the Emperor's will glinting in improbable calm. Navigators must interpret the beacon's strength not in absolutes, but in gradients, zones of clarity, twilight, and obscurity. Some have devised charts ranking signal stability in poetic terms: the golden flame, the pale ember, the smoking wick. Each indicates a level of risk, a degree of warp distortion, a measure of how likely it is that a ship can find its way home. These charts are jealously guarded, passed through noble houses like heirlooms, encoded in metaphor and song, lest they fall into heretical hands or worse, draw the attention of rivals. To venture near the edge is to gamble not only with one's life, but with one's soul. Ships in the pale ember zone often resort to fallback rituals, invoking machine spirits and repeating pre-warp catechisms for hours before translation. Every jump is a plea for survival. Some captains turn to sanctioned navigators of especially potent bloodlines or rare, borderline heretical technologies like ancient cogitators or xenotech lenses. The more desperate might strike bargains with rogue trader dynasties who operate under special charter, their vessels bristling with warp augurs and void shrouds not seen since the Great Crusade. In these outer zones, astropathic messages become garbled or arrive centuries late. Reinforcements, supplies, even tithes may simply stop. For isolated systems near the edge, the Astronomican is like the last star on a cloudy night, sometimes there, sometimes gone. Imperial authorities treat these regions with both dread and possessiveness. Segmentum boundaries often trace the reach of the beacon, not political logic. The further one gets from its center, the more the Imperium rules by myth and memory, not by law or presence. Every few decades, expeditions are launched to chart or reconnect these margins. Most vanish without trace. Some return triumphant, bearing new star maps, data cores, or even long-lost colony registries. But even these are tinged with horror. Crews are reduced, navigators are blindfolded or sedated, captains refuse to speak of certain jump points, and always there are gaps in their records, entire weeks or months missing, redacted or overwritten by nonsense symbols. What truths they glimpse, they do not share. Perhaps they do not remember, or perhaps they fear the Inquisition more than madness. Thus the edge becomes a place of paradox, the boundary of safety and the lure of the unknown. Every extension of the Astronomican's reach brings fresh hope and fresh horror. Every loss near its edge is mourned and mythologized. And those who dwell near this frontier, whether explorers, pioneers, or prisoners, live lives balanced between light and oblivion. They are the last to see the Emperor's light. And they may be the first to know when it goes out. Out on the rim of the Imperium, where the Emperor's light thins to a whisper and the warp grows restless, are the frontier worlds, fragile embers clinging to the dying breath of human dominion. These are the bastions built on sand, the lonely beacons set against the black. Their names are often forgotten, or else spoken in regret. Outposts like Vexus Prime, Driftspire, and Calidor's Reach. To dwell here is to live with constant uncertainty, for the Astronomican does not burn steady this far. It flickers like a candle in a storm, and when it fades, so too do all hopes of rescue. These edge worlds are strange contradictions. They are part of the Imperium, sworn to the God Emperor, paying tithes, reciting catechisms, and yet their lives are governed more by local custom than by central law. Administratum oversight is a rumor. Arbites are few, and their power diluted by planetary governors who must balance loyalty to Terra with the immediate needs of survival. Here, the laws are written in blood and enforced with desperation. Each world becomes its own little Imperium, adopting the symbols of the Aquila, but interpreting them through isolation and need. On these fringes, faith becomes something wilder. Ecclesiarchal missionaries who reach such places often find that the God Emperor is already worshipped, but in ways unrecognizable to the Ministorum. On one world, he may be a star god who breathes fire across the void. On another, a reclusive spirit whose name is only whispered during warp storms. Heresy? Perhaps, but who can blame them? When the light of the Astronomican vanishes for months at a time, when astropathic messages turn to gibberish, people begin to invent gods that listen. The threat of sudden isolation hangs over every aspect of life. Supply chains are erratic. A single failed warp jump can mean years without ammunition, medicine, or food supplements. Many of these worlds have developed complete self-sufficiency out of necessity, growing into cultures as foreign to Terra as any Xenos enclave. Some even forget their imperial origins. There are stories, too numerous to ignore, of worlds that drifted into total darkness, only to be rediscovered generations later with new languages, altered genetics, or rulers claiming divine descent from long-dead imperial governors. And yet, people choose to live here. Some are born on these edges and know no other life. Others come by choice, prospectors seeking untouched mineral wealth, rogue traders hoping to establish footholds, dissidents fleeing the inquisitorial eye. The lure of the unknown is powerful. For every dozen doomed colonies, there is one that thrives, hidden beneath the veil of obscurity. These outliers often become cultural chimera, fusing imperial dogma with local innovation, surviving where stricter regimes would collapse. The military presence on the frontier is minimal and ad hoc. Often, the only defense comes from PDF forces cobbled together from untrained conscripts and antique war gear. Occasionally, the Adeptus Mechanicus or Astartes pass through on mission, leaving behind tales of awe and terror, stories that will become scripture to the next generation. Some frontier governors maintain contact with rogue traders, trading artifacts or Xenos specimens for weaponry and protection. Others simply pray and dig in, hoping that their isolation keeps them beneath the notice of more terrible powers. What binds these places to the Imperium is not control but myth. They still bear the eagle on their flags, still paint the Emperor's face in their shrines, still speak of Terra as a distant paradise. But when warp storms howl and the sky turns red, when their last astropath screams and dies, they do not look to the Imperium for salvation. They look inward. Survival becomes a sacrament, and if that means altering doctrine, silencing dissent, or sacrificing a few thousand lives to calm the local warp spirits, then so be it. Many such worlds maintain fragmentary records of past visits by the Imperium, shattered cogitators, faded data slates, broken vox logs. These remnants are pored over by local scholars like sacred relics, trying to reconstruct what true imperial culture looked like. In this way, these places become accidental time capsules, echoes of earlier epochs shaped by myth and necessity. Some speak of an ancient, golden Imperium that once reached even further, a time before the Edge existed, when Terra's light bathed all. Whether this is memory, fabrication, or psychic inheritance, none can say. To live at the edge of the Astronomican is to live in a constant state of waiting, waiting for the light to return, for the fleet to arrive, for the message to be answered. Some wait in faith, others in fear, but all know in their hearts that they are alone. And in that loneliness, they find either madness or a terrifying kind of freedom. Beyond the Astronomican's reach lie the blind regions, stretches of space where imperial charts end and where the Emperor's light no longer shines. These are not simply uncharted voids, but realms where navigation becomes a matter of madness or miracle. No astropathic whispers reach here, no coded orders from Terra. And yet in that darkness, life continues. Human life. Civilizations that once hailed from the Imperium but have long since fallen silent, their voices lost to warp static and their cultures warped by isolation, memory, and necessity. Some of these blind regions hold the remnants of ancient colonization efforts, expeditions sent during the Great Crusade or even earlier, during the Dark Age of technology. When the warp shifted or the Astronomican dimmed, these settlers were cut off. What they became is unknowable. Some might still call themselves loyal, reciting prayers in a language no longer spoken by the Imperium, venerating the Emperor in forms both beautiful and grotesque. Others may have forgotten entirely, building new pantheons, new social structures, seeing themselves not as lost but as reborn. The Imperium officially labels these regions as non-compliant, but that term is woefully insufficient. In truth, they are forgotten, erased not by malice, but by time and distance. Administratum records might still contain faded references, a planetary designation, a ship manifest, a promising data extract from a long-dead astropath. But no reinforcement will come, no tides will be expected. These places lie in the galactic graveyard of bureaucratic oversight, where the weight of 1 trillion souls has rendered memory into ash. Yet rumors persist. Rogue traders and black market voidfarers speak in hushed tones of ghost empires. Human civilizations that grew in the dark, advanced in strange directions, and now view the Imperium as legend or lie. One tale tells of a system governed by machine priests who remember Mars only as a corrupted Eden, their tech cults obsessed not with preservation but with evolution. Another speaks of a human empire that rejected warp travel entirely, relying on ancient stasis technologies to travel slowly, patiently across the void, millennia between worlds but free from demonic threat. In some cases, these lost colonies have turned hostile. To them, the Imperium is an invading force, a crusade of fanatics who seek to erase centuries of hard-earned independence. Recontact efforts rarely go well. Language barriers, divergent values, and sheer cultural shock often escalate into conflict. Even when diplomacy succeeds, the Inquisition watches closely, wary of contamination. What heresies fester in such places? What alien ideas have taken root in human minds left too long in the dark? There are darker rumors still. That some of these blind regions are not merely forgotten, but deliberately shunned. That the Imperium, in its most secretive chambers, knows of entire systems corrupted beyond redemption. Worlds where warp exposure has twisted entire populations into unrecognizable forms, where the line between man and daemon has blurred. These places may still bear the names of human colonies, but their souls are lost, and the Ordo Malleus ensures no light will ever reach them again. And yet for all the horror, there is also a lure. The dream of rediscovery, of lighting a candle in the void. Some Magos explorators have built careers on the promise of reclaiming lost human knowledge from these regions. Some Astartes chapters have made it their sacred duty to bring such worlds back into compliance, seeing in them echoes of the Great Crusade's promise. And rogue traders, bold, reckless, brilliant, sometimes return with relics beyond comprehension. Star maps etched into living metal. Artifacts that warp gravity. Languages that seem to echo through the warp itself. It is this tension between the horror of what humanity becomes in isolation and the hope of what it might reclaim that defines the blind regions. They are both a warning and a temptation. A mirror held up to the Imperium, showing what it might become if the Astronomican were to fail entirely. Some say these regions are a glimpse into the Imperium's future, fragmented, disconnected, surviving by myth and force alone. What binds all these tales together is uncertainty. These are places beyond verification. No Vox relay can confirm them. No chart can be fully trusted. Every expedition into the blind carries the risk of never returning, or worse, returning changed. For every survivor with a story, there are a dozen ships lost in silence. Some say that is the true test of the frontier, not what can be discovered, but what one is willing to risk for the chance. In the depths beyond the Astronomican's fading glow, where even the last flickers of human presence grow rare, alien empires rise, vast, ancient, and unknowable. These are not the fractured warbands of the orcs or the piratical cabals of the Drukhari. These are dominions carved into the dark, nurtured in silence, thriving where humanity dares not tread. Their names are spoken only in whispers, if at all. Some are known to the Imperium, others exist only in the fearful imaginings of those who have stared too long into the abyss and returned to speak of it. The most infamous of these is, of course, the Tau Empire. Though technically still within reach of the Astronomican on its inner fringes, the Tau territories extend outward into zones where Imperial navigation grows thin. The Tau, with their preference for real space travel and technological precision, do not depend on the warp as mankind does. To them, the absence of the Astronomican is not a limitation, but an opportunity, a chance to expand into regions where the Imperium's grip fails. Their colonies creep outward like a slow, methodical tide, establishing beachheads where human vessels fear to sail. But the Tau are not the greatest threat. They are merely the visible tip of something vaster. Beyond their reach are entities older than the Imperium, perhaps older than mankind itself. There are records in the Black Library, fragmented and metaphorical, that speak of empires of crystalline minds drifting through the void, whose vessels sing in gravitational harmonics, and whose language is written in magnetic resonance. There are hints of entire regions governed not by matter, but by psychic consensus, where planets obey thought and war is waged in dreams. The Imperium has encountered such things only in glimpses. The last transmissions of exploratory fleets, fragments decoded from ancient Xenos ruins, the testimony of broken minds. Some believe the Necrons once ruled much of this dark frontier and may yet sleep beneath its stars, waiting to reclaim their dominion. Their dolmen gates, scattered across the edges of Imperial space, may lead not inward, but outward, to sectors so distant and alien that they defy known stellar cartography. There are also stories of the Rakghoul, savage beyond measure, who seem to thrive in the most hostile corners of the void. Though often dismissed as feral raiders, some inquisitors suspect a deeper pattern in their movements, a migration or perhaps even an exodus, fleeing from something even more terrifying that stirs beyond mapped space. If that is true, then what hunts the Rakghoul is something no human mind has yet comprehended, let alone survived. And still the rumors multiply. Of sentient nebulae that consume thoughts instead of matter. Of void beasts the size of moons, whose existence is felt only as the sudden madness of an entire sector. Of artificial stars that pulse with coded messages, whose signals carry languages so vast they alter the minds of those who hear them. Some rogue traders claim to have seen these things. Most are presumed mad. Some are quietly silenced by the Inquisition. But the tales never stop. There is a growing theory among the Ordo Xenos, heretical of course, that the galaxy we know is but a bubble in a far vaster sea, that the regions beyond the Astronomican are not empty, but merely tuned to a different kind of perception, that the Xenos who dwell there do not ignore us out of fear or ignorance, but out of disdain, for to them humanity is a fading light, a brief flicker in a long night. In some ways, the Imperium is lucky. The Astronomican may act as a repellent, a lighthouse whose signal disturbs or wards off certain kinds of alien minds. Some species may be unable or unwilling to approach the psychic pollution it emits. But as the light dims, that protection falters. What was once a wall may soon become a doorway. The alien is not just outside, it is beyond. Beyond language, beyond reason, beyond even the warp in some cases. It is the mirror that shows humanity how narrow its vision truly is. And when it comes, not if, but when, it will not come with banners or battleships. It will come with silence, with entropy, with transformation so total it cannot be called war. For now, these empires wait, or perhaps they do not wait at all, for waiting implies a shared framework of time. Perhaps they are already here, unfolding slowly into our awareness like a flower opening in reverse. Perhaps our galaxy is already surrounded. And the Astronomican, for all its brilliance, is simply the last candle burning in a room that has been dark for far too long. Warp travel is always a dance with death, even within the Emperor's light. But outside the Astronomican, it becomes something else entirely. Not just dangerous, not just unpredictable, but unknowable. The warp, already a sea of chaos, becomes an abyss without stars, a place where direction, time, and identity decay. To enter the warp beyond the beacon is to cast oneself into a void of screaming possibilities, where the navigators are blind and every moment stretches into infinity or collapses into nothing. Without the Astronomican's guiding flame, navigators are left with only the barest tools: instinct, ancestral memory, and the shifting tides of their own warped biology. Some refuse such voyages altogether, swearing oaths that no coin or charter can break. Others attempt it only with the aid of arcane relics, ancient warp compasses, Xeno's echolocators, or devices whose origins are lost in myth. Even then, success is rare. For most ships, the journey becomes a question of faith, not in the Emperor, but in luck, in the will of the ship, or in the mercy of the void itself. Those who attempt such navigation speak afterward, if they survive, of horrifying phenomena. There are tales of ships that re-emerge covered in barnacle-like growths of unknown material, or of crews who find their reflections no longer match their movements. Some vessels report encountering themselves in the warp. Ghost versions of their ship, damaged and bleeding, trailing screams through the ether. In more extreme cases, time itself fractures. A ship might exit the warp to find its destination world a dead rock, its sun long extinguished. Or worse, find it still thriving, but not yet colonized. The Imperium has protocols for blind warp jumps, though they are more ritual than procedure. Prayers must be said, sacrifices made, and the ship's machine spirit placated through circuits older than human memory. Some captains carry sealed orders, to be opened only if the Astronomican fails, directions to secret safe zones, constructed during the Great Crusade, or by unknown hands. These are desperate measures, used only when all else fails. Even then, the odds of survival are slim. Without the Astronomican, the warp becomes vastly more predatory. Daemons, usually held at bay by the Astronomican signal, press in closer. Warp currents become more violent, more deceptive. Some scholars speculate that the Astronomican does more than guide. It repels. Its psychic energy may distort or suppress the worst warp phenomena. In its absence, the sea boils. There are accounts of ships that re-entered real space to find entire decks mutated, their occupants fused into the hull or turned inside out, still alive and screaming. Others speak of silence, ships found adrift, completely intact, but with every soul aboard turned to salt or dust. It is not just the environment that changes. The navigators themselves are affected. Those who survive such blind jumps often emerge different. Their warp eyes are scarred. Some refuse to open them again. Others develop new abilities or new hungers. More than one navigator house has had to quarantine members who returned from unguided voyages, afraid of what they might have brought back inside themselves. The psychological toll is immense. Crews often suffer mass hallucinations, believing they have arrived when they have not, or encountering familiar voices speaking from the walls. There are tales of ships that never left the warp, that created their own real space facsimiles, entire false systems populated by constructs built from the crew's memories. Sometimes these phantoms are so convincing that the crew never realizes they are still in the Imperium. The Adeptus Mechanicus has attempted to map blind warp routes using logic engines and AI cores predating the Imperium. The results are inconclusive at best, catastrophic at worst. One such experiment, the Horologion Calculi project, reportedly produced a warp route so precise that it circumvented known space entirely. Yet the only ship to attempt it returned instantly, empty, with no record of having departed. All of this combines to create a simple truth. Warp travel without the Astronomican is not sustainable. It is a gamble, a sacrifice, a plea screamed into a hurricane. The few who succeed become legends. The rest become debris, or worse, warnings. And yet the Imperium still sends ships, still dares the dark, because sometimes even madness is better than silence. From beyond even the dark edges of the galaxy, where even the last flickers of human presence grow rare, something comes, not merely from outside the Astronomican, but from outside the known universe itself. The Tyranids, the great devourer. They do not arise within the warp, nor do they heed its rules. They arrive from intergalactic void, from blackness so deep it has no stars. This is not an invasion in the conventional sense. It is consumption. A slow, inevitable tide, grinding across the galaxy, not with malice, but with hunger. And the worst part is this. What we have seen is not the full host, merely its vanguard. The Tyranid hive fleets that have breached the galactic rim, Behemoth, Kraken, Leviathan, are but tendrils, exploratory feelers reaching out from something larger, something waiting in the black between galaxies. The Astronomican has no meaning to them. They do not use the warp in the same way as human ships or demonic presences. They travel by biodrives, through incomprehensible corridors of real space, or perhaps through means yet to be understood. But wherever they go, they erase. Not only life, but memory, context, and history. They strip planets clean and move on. What does it mean that such creatures can navigate the void without psychic light? It means they are alien not only in form, but in philosophy. Where humanity sees the warp as a medium of thought and soul, the Tyranids see only noise, a thing to be suppressed, devoured, or silenced. Their very presence in the warp is anomalous, creating the dreaded shadow, a psychic blackout that drowns the Astronomican, overwhelms astropaths, and blinds navigators. To them, our beacon is not a guide, it is prey. It is this shadow that heralds their approach, a smothering wave that reduces communication and astrogation to futile gestures. Worlds engulfed by the shadow find themselves alone, severed from the rest of the Imperium not only physically, but psychically. Astropaths go mad, screaming out visions of chittering dark. Sanctioned psychers burn out like candles in a furnace. Even the Emperor's light grows faint. And then, the biological horror descends, waves of organisms perfectly adapted, endlessly varied, designed not for conquest, but for digestion. But more terrifying still is the suggestion that the Tyranids are not fleeing something. They are following something. Some among the Ordo Xenos speculate that a greater intelligence lies behind them, not merely a vast mind, but an oceanic will. So immense, so alien, that even the hive mind may be just a projection, a limb, a scout. Others believe they are moving towards something. Perhaps it is the Astronomican itself, a flare that has drawn their attention across millions of light years. If so, then the Imperium's greatest achievement may have also become its final beacon. A lighthouse not warning of rocks, but calling the predators home. The existence of the Tyranids has altered Imperial understanding of galactic geography. No longer is the galaxy the boundary of threat. Now, even the space beyond is hostile. The black between galaxies, once thought empty, is now known to contain life, or at least hunger. The presence of the Tyranids proves that distance is no protection, that silence is not safety, that something has been watching. There are further signs, cryptic patterns in the distribution of Tyranid incursions, hints that they are probing, testing, mapping psychic signatures. The hive mind learns from every encounter. Defeats are not setbacks, but data points. Each slain organism is part of an experiment, and the next wave comes stronger, better adapted, tailored to overcome whatever defenses it faced last. This is not war. It is ecological inevitability. Worse still are the whispers of other hive fleets stirring in distant void. Fleets not yet seen, but felt. Their psychic weight sensed by only the most sensitive minds. A shadow behind the shadow. Some inquisitors speak of a coming convergence, when all the hive fleets will turn inward, and the true bulk of the great devourer will press against the edge of the galaxy. When that moment comes, the Astronomican may not be dimmed, it may be extinguished. The Adeptus Mechanicus has noted strange emissions at the edge of known space, gravitational distortions, unexplained bursts of subatomic decay, and bizarre patterns in stellar consumption. Could these be the feeding trails of the Tyranids? Or worse, could they be signs of others? Species like the Tyranids, or greater still, who have never yet touched the galactic disk? The void is vast, and now we know it is not empty. Ultimately, the Tyranids are more than a threat. They are a revelation, a brutal confirmation that the universe is not waiting to be explored. It is waiting to be eaten. That which lies beyond the Astronomican is not merely alien. It is predatory, and it is already moving. Before the Great Crusade, before even the rise of the Emperor, humanity knew darkness. It was called the Age of Strife, the Old Night. A time when warp storms severed worlds from one another, when psychers emerged without guidance, and when mankind, once godlike in technological prowess, collapsed into tribal fear and primal violence. Now, at the galaxy's edge, beyond the reach of the Astronomican, many fear that this nightmare has begun again, not as a historical echo, but as a living, breathing phenomenon. There are systems where warp storms have never receded, where the Astronomican's light has never touched. In these shadowed pockets, what might have endured? Entire human populations left to stew in their own mutations, to worship warp entities as gods, to regress into techno-barbarism or ascend into post-human monstrosity. These are not just theoretical dangers. They are observed, albeit through shattered pict feeds and the fragments of recovered vox logs. Even the Inquisition admits, in its most classified archives, that localized strifes continue to occur with increasing frequency on the fringe. One world, uncovered during a failed reconquest campaign, revealed a human-descended population that had reverted to pre-industrial levels. But worse, their ruling caste consisted entirely of uncontrolled psychers, warp-touched aristocrats who maintained control through telepathy, terror, and ritual sacrifice. Another planet showed evidence of a civilization that had become entirely machine-worshipping. Not in the manner of the Adeptus Mechanicus, but in literal symbiosis with AI remnants thought purged during the Men of Iron's fall. These cultures are not merely alien, they are warnings of what humanity becomes without the light of unity. The Age of Strife was not a single event, but a fracturing, a million different apocalypses playing out across a million worlds. On some, humanity was consumed by its own genetic hubris. On others, it was enslaved by its own creations. Many vanished into silence. Now that silence creeps back in. On the rim, systems go dark and stay dark. Warp storms that had calmed for centuries reawaken with no clear cause. Astropaths describe screams in languages no longer used, images of burning skies and broken moons. Something ancient stirs, or perhaps it never truly left. The return of the old night is not a metaphor, it is literal. The same conditions that led to the first age of strife are reappearing. Warp instability, technological regression, cultural fragmentation, psychic overload. The Imperium may have held these forces at bay for 10,000 years, but it did so through sheer will, through the enforced unity of the Astronomican's light. Remove that and entropy wins, always. The edge of the galaxy is not just where light fails, it is where memory breaks down, where history becomes myth, and where the cycle of collapse begins anew. In isolated systems, strange cults arise, not the organized heresies of chaos, but something older, more primal. Faiths built around local anomalies, planetary spirits, or psychic echoes. On one world, an entire religion formed around a malfunctioning STC that dispenses random, often nonsensical schematics. On another, a solar flare was interpreted as divine judgment, and a new theocracy emerged, its rulers claiming to interpret the sky's wrath. Left unchecked, these belief systems ossify, turning inward, becoming hostile to outside influence. When Imperial forces do return, if they return, they are met not with relief, but with spears and curses. And always, there are the psychers. In the absence of training, oversight, or the black ships, nascent psychers go unchecked. Many die horribly, consumed by demonic entities or their own unstable powers. But some survive, some rule, some become gods in the eyes of their followers. These warlords, sometimes noble, sometimes monstrous, shape entire civilizations. Some of them may be noble in intention, even protective. But their very existence is a threat to the Imperium's stability. Uncontrolled psychic power is a fuse without a bomb. It burns until something explodes. There is a tragic beauty in these lost civilizations, in their resilience, in their reinvention, in their desperate attempts to find meaning in a universe that has forgotten them. But they are fragile, and that fragility breeds violence. Many fall under the sway of chaos not through temptation, but through loneliness. The warp listens to the cries of the forgotten, and sometimes it answers in forms that offer hope, power, vengeance, even love. What begins as survival becomes corruption. What begins as prayer becomes possession. Thus, the edge of the galaxy becomes a forge of nightmares, not because it is uniquely cursed, but because it is unguarded. The Imperium, for all its tyranny and stagnation, provides a cage strong enough to hold back certain horrors. Remove the cage and the horrors dance. That is the lesson of the old night. And that is the warning etched into the bones of every planet that lies too long beyond the Astronomican's light. There are places on the map where cartographers do not draw borders. They place skulls. Zones declared forbidden not because they are unknown, but because they are known too well. These are the regions beyond the Astronomican that the Imperium does not discuss in public documents, does not mark on standard star charts, and does not acknowledge in its proclamations. They are the censored truths, the burned logs, the secrets buried beneath layers of ritual, silence, and sanctioned forgetting. They are the forbidden zones. Some of these regions are literal voids, places where ships vanish with mathematical consistency, where warp anomalies pulse like black hearts, too regular to be natural. Others are dense star clusters emitting no light, or regions where communication fails without apparent interference. Explorators call these quiet reefs. Navigators refuse to enter them. The Mechanicus marks them only in private ledgers. The Inquisition refers to them with single-word ciphers: Golgotha, Hollow, Redwake. What lies within? No one knows, or no one is allowed to say. But even more disturbing are the records of discovered forbidden zones, sites of ancient catastrophe where expeditions found signs not of war, but of deletion. Systems where the planets remain in orbit but all biological matter has been erased, worlds where time runs incorrectly or where orbital decay reverses itself. One system, catalogued only in a quarantine data vault beneath the Schola Progenium of St. Kieran, was described as a mirror turned inward, a solar system aware of being observed. The team that reported this returned mute, their minds unresponsive to telepathic probes. They were declared martyrs, and their remains vaporized. There are whispers that some of these zones predate humanity, that even the Necrons tread lightly in certain areas, that the Eldar, for all their arrogance, will not speak of them. That in the most ancient craftworld libraries, there are poems, not records, describing the veins of unbeing and the prison of mouths. Whether these are metaphors or attempts to rationalize the irrational, none can say. But the implication is clear. Something is buried beyond the light, and even the oldest beings fear to touch it. The Imperium has sent missions to some of these places, always quietly, always under cover of other operations. Often, these are not military expeditions, but inquisitorial kill teams, Mechanicus black vessels, or unsanctioned fleets run by silenced rogue traders. Most do not return. Those that do bring back fragments, objects that disrupt Auspex readings, drive servitors insane, or produce dreams in sleeping crew. One such object, retrieved from the Dead Reflection Zone near Segmentum Pacificus, was said to be a mirror that shows not the viewer, but the room behind them, even when turned to face a wall. There are also systems that are known to the Imperium, but are kept hidden because of what they contain. Not emptiness, but activity. Hidden manufactoria, black sites for experimental weapons, vaults of ancient technology too dangerous to use. Some of these may be relics from the dark age of technology, preserved not for study, but for burial. The Adeptus Mechanicus has been accused, always in whispers, of maintaining secret empires in the dark, networks of resource extraction and forbidden research where the light of Terra does not reach. Whether true or not, the belief alone fuels paranoia. And then there are the stories that even inquisitors refuse to write down. Tales of ships that returned with new constellations etched into their hulls. Of entire crews that converted mid-journey, speaking in voices not their own, drawing star maps that change nightly. Of discoveries so profound that they would undo the faith of billions. Or worse, that would confirm everything the ecclesiarchy fears most. These are the hidden truths, the ones not suppressed for danger, but for despair. Not because they threaten the body of the Imperium, but because they threaten its soul. In this way, the forbidden zones become not just places of danger, but of meaning. They are the edges of human understanding, the places where science, faith, and sanity all fail. The Imperium hides them not only from the people, but from itself. They are the subconscious of the galaxy, the buried trauma, the memory of things too vast, too cruel, too true to bear. What lies beyond the Astronomican's light is not just darkness, it is secrecy. A curtain drawn over horrors so profound that even the stars dare not shine on them. And those few who pierce that curtain do not return with answers. They return with silence. In a galaxy defined by dogma and brutal certainty, myths should have no place, and yet they thrive, especially at the edge of the Astronomican's reach. Here, where the light falters and rational order gives way to whispers and dreams, stories take root. Tales told by voidfarers, half-mad navigators, and rogue traders who return changed. None can be confirmed, none can be disproven. But they persist, repeated in mess halls, echoing through ship corridors, or scrawled onto the hulls of derelicts. These are not mere fables, they are warnings in disguise, or perhaps memories buried too deep to confront directly. One of the most enduring legends is that of the Sunken Empire, a human civilization beyond the Astronomican that never fell, never regressed, and never contacted the Imperium again. According to tales, they possess warpless travel, stable governance, and even peace. But they reject the Imperium, seeing it as a madness that overtook humanity, a cult of stagnation built on a throne of corpses. Some say they watch us still, observing from afar, unwilling to interfere. Others say they are long dead, but their ruins remain, filled with truths the Imperium could never allow to surface. Then there is the Dying Angel, a ship-sized creature that appears at the rim of navigable space, seemingly composed of light and song. It offers guidance to those lost in the warp, leading ships safely through impossible regions. But only once. The next time it is encountered, it is silent, watching, weeping. Some say it is a fragment of the Emperor's soul. Others claim it is the last memory of a dead god, seeking closure before it fades completely. No one who has seen the angel describes it the same way, but all agree it is impossibly beautiful and impossibly sad. Other myths speak of the Oath Stars, a constellation that appears only once in a navigator's life, always at a moment of greatest need. To see them is to be shown a path forward, a solution, an escape. But they vanish just as quickly, and their positions cannot be recorded. Some believe the Oath Stars are not real at all, but manifestations of the human spirit, a hallucination shared across generations, triggered by some deep psychic instinct. Others suggest they are real, but intelligent, a sentient pattern, communicating in stellar geometry. And darker tales abound. The feast world of Mortem Lux, where every 50 years a planet-sized beacon draws all nearby ships toward it, only for their crews to vanish, leaving vessels eerily pristine. The Black Sun, visible only when one closes one's eyes in warp space, a gravitational ghost that is felt, not seen. The Choir of Hollow Voices, a phantom signal that enters the vox of drifting ships, consisting of hymns in languages long dead, always sung in groups of 13. Some claim it is a call, others, a warning. The Adeptus Mechanicus has tried to analyze the signal, but fails to detect it on any frequency. It simply appears, like memory surfacing unbidden. Perhaps the most disturbing myth is that of the Pilgrims of Dust, a supposed group of beings who walk from world to world, leaving no trace but silence. Wherever they pass, populations vanish. There is no violence, no decay, just absence. Only afterward do people realize entire cities are gone. The Inquisition denies their existence, but in some archives, redacted files reference patterned dustwalk and echo phenomena. The suggestion is chilling. Perhaps the greatest threat beyond the Astronomican is not war, not hunger, but forgetting. These stories may be inventions, or they may be the only way the human mind can process what truly exists beyond the light. Just as the warp reflects thoughts, perhaps the edge of the galaxy reflects fears, and some of those reflections become self-aware. What begins as a metaphor takes form. What begins as a prayer becomes a pathway. Even the Inquisition collects these myths, though they classify them under liminal incidents or chronosubjective folklore. One inquisitor once remarked, "The line between madness and revelation is only clear to those who have seen neither." For the Ordo Xenos and Malleus alike, these legends offer something both terrifying and precious: insight. The raw data of the human subconscious expressed in narrative. And perhaps more chilling than any of the myths themselves is this: many of them overlap. Stories told on different sides of the galaxy describe the same voices, the same shapes, the same dreams. This convergence suggests one of two things. Either humanity's fear has a universal shape, or there is something out there shaping it. Whatever the truth, these myths are more than idle tales. They are the shadow language of a species groping in the dark, trying to name the shapes it cannot see. And perhaps someday one of those names will answer back. The edge of the Astronomican is not just a place of physical danger. It is a boundary of thought. Beyond it, certainty dissolves. The ordered structure of the Imperium, its rituals and ranks, its sacred laws and cycles, were all built under the watchful eye of the Emperor's light. But where that light fades, so too does the meaning of these structures. What does it mean to be human when humanity is alone? What is the value of faith when there is no response? At the edge of the galaxy, such questions are not philosophical indulgences, they are survival mechanisms. There is an idea, whispered among scholars and silenced among priests, that the Astronomican is not merely a beacon, but a cage, that it does not illuminate the galaxy so much as define its limits, that the Imperium's survival relies not on mastery, but on confinement, psychological, spiritual, and spatial. The Emperor's light is a tether, and without it, we are unmoored. Some view this with fear, others with longing. What lies beyond is not just threat, it is freedom. Many who live on the rim feel this in their bones. The further from Terra one travels, the more the dictates of the High Lords become abstract, the more the edicts of the ecclesiarchy lose relevance. Law becomes local, faith becomes personal, and identity, so tightly controlled within the Imperium, begins to shift. Some see themselves no longer as imperial citizens, but as something else. Not heretics, not rebels, simply other, unbound, and for many, that is intoxicating. But with freedom comes the abyss. Without the Astronomican, there is no compass. Not in space, not in spirit. Philosophy at the edge turns bleak. Some worlds embrace nihilism, worshipping entropy or silence itself. Others construct new ideologies, blending fragments of imperial truth with local belief and alien myth. Entire schools of thought rise and fall within single generations, arguing not over theology, but over the nature of existence itself. Is there a purpose to the universe, or only hunger? Is the Emperor a god, or a shadow on the wall of a far larger truth? In these places, thought itself becomes dangerous. Some scholars go mad, trying to reconcile imperial doctrine with what they experience beyond the beacon. Others become visionaries, proclaiming new gospels, writing new scripture in blood and starlight. These thinkers are often purged when the Imperium returns. Their works burned, their followers executed. But the ideas persist, like radiation lingering after a detonation. And some of those ideas are beautiful. The idea that humanity is not alone, that there are other civilizations, perhaps kinder, that survival does not require cruelty, that there might be another way. Even among the Inquisition, a few radical cells believe in such possibilities. They are hunted as traitors, but they endure, because the truth is, the galaxy could be different. The fact that it is not, is a choice. And that knowledge, more than any daemon or xenos, is what truly threatens the Imperium. There is also the notion that the Astronomican's light is not only a cage, but a distraction, that it draws attention. That the Imperium, in its psychic brilliance, makes itself visible to entities that would otherwise pass it by. In this view, the further one moves from the light, the safer one becomes. Not physically, but metaphysically. The Astronomican becomes a lighthouse, not to guide, but to lure. And if that is true, then the edge is not a danger, but a sanctuary. Some even suggest that the Emperor himself never intended the Astronomican to last, that it was a bridge, not a prison. That the ultimate goal was not to maintain the beacon, but to transcend the need for it. To evolve beyond reliance on the warp, on psychic travel, on centralized control. In this interpretation, the Imperium has failed not by dimming the light, but by clinging to it. By fearing the dark instead of embracing what might lie within it. This is the philosophical abyss, a place where truth becomes fluid, where hope and horror become indistinguishable. It is the frontier not of space, but of meaning. And those who peer into it must decide, is humanity a species meant to be ruled, or one meant to explore? Is the Emperor a god to be worshipped, or a lesson to be understood? And if the Astronomican fades at last, will that be the end of humanity, or its true beginning? In every age, in every era, there are those who look up and ask what lies beyond. Even in the suffocating embrace of the Imperium, even under the unblinking gaze of the ecclesiarchy and the brutal calculus of the Adeptus Administratum, this impulse endures. It is older than the Astronomican, older than the warp. It is human. The desire to go beyond the next star, the next system, the next thought. to cross boundaries not just of space, but of understanding, and that desire burns brightest where the light fades, at the edge of the galaxy. The edge is not merely a boundary, it is a temptation, a siren call echoing in the hearts of voidfarers, dreamers, and outcasts. For some, it whispers of riches, for others, freedom, and for a few, it promises revelation. These are the explorers who disobey orders, the rogue traders who vanish for decades, the excommunicated inquisitors who refuse to stop asking questions. They are not heroes, they are not always sane, but they are necessary. Because the truth is, the Imperium was never meant to stop at the edge, it was meant to leap. The Great Crusade was not just a war, it was an act of vision, a belief that the stars belonged to humanity, that we could not only survive but shape the galaxy. That dream has been buried under 10,000 years of bureaucracy, war, and fear. But it is not dead. It flickers in the forbidden thoughts of heretics and radicals. It glows in the eyes of children born on edge worlds who have never seen Terra. It lives in the silence between warp storms, where the void waits to be named. To walk beyond the Astronomican's light is to enter a realm unshaped by human will. No banners, no census, no imperial truth. And yet, it is precisely there that humanity might find itself again, not as soldiers, not as worshippers, but as seekers. As beings who choose meaning rather than inherit it. That choice is dangerous. Most who make it are consumed, forgotten, or hunted, but some endure, some discover, and those few become legends. The galaxy is vast, but what lies beyond the galaxy is something greater still: possibility. Not all possibilities are good. Many are worse than we can imagine. But possibility is hope's twin. It means that the story is not finished, that the universe is not a tomb, but a question. And questions demand answers. So what lies beyond the Astronomican's light? We may never know. But someone, somewhere, will step into that darkness, not because they are ordered to, not because they seek power, but because they must, because something in them cannot rest. And when that step is taken, the galaxy will change. There comes a point for those who dwell too long at the galaxy's edge when the silence stops being threatening and starts becoming comforting. This is the most dangerous transformation of all. Not fear, not madness, but acceptance. A quiet resignation that the Imperium will never return, that the light is gone for good, and that what exists now is the new order. This mindset takes root not only in individuals but in entire worlds. And when it does, something within the species begins to change. This is the Twilight state, not fully fallen, not fully free. Civilizations caught between allegiance and abandonment, drifting psychologically as much as spatially. On these fringe planets, you find strange phenomena. Cities where time is kept by the pulse of a distant warp echo. Societies where children are taught 6 versions of imperial history, each contradictory, each considered sacred. Armies raised not to fight enemies, but to perform ceremonial wars that appease something none dare name. These aren't signs of collapse, they're signs of mutation. Cultural evolution under pressure. Human nature rewritten by absence. The High Lords may not see these places, but the Inquisition does. Or at least, some of them. Within the Ordo Hereticus there are radical cells who study edge drift as a phenomenon, not merely as heresy. One such faction, the Noctum Circle, argues that these twilight states are necessary, that without the psychological rupture caused by prolonged exposure to the unknown, humanity will never develop beyond its current spiritual limitations. They speak of post-imperial emergence, of psychic thresholds crossed in solitude, of entire planetary populations beginning to resonate with new frequencies of the warp, not as prey, but as participants. This idea terrifies the ecclesiarchy, because if true, it would mean that faith in the Emperor is not the only path to transcendence. That isolation, when endured long enough, may generate its own forms of truth. On some edge worlds, missionaries have been executed not for preaching, but for interrupting the natural progression of a world's inner logic. These populations often react violently, not because they are corrupted, but because they are complete. Their myths are self-sustaining. Their rituals work, not by the Emperor's hand, but by their own collective will. This is not chaos, at least not in the usual sense. These aren't worlds writhing with daemons or covered in mutation. They are stable, peaceful, even, but they are wrong in ways that cannot be quantified. Their warp presence is off, tilted, humming in unfamiliar cadences. Ships that land there often suffer subtle changes. Cogitators developing new dialects, servo skulls humming in minor keys, vox signals carrying background whispers in reverse low Gothic. It's not corruption, it's divergence. In response, the Inquisition has begun compiling a list of such worlds under the designation Argophoki, zones of emergent deviation. The list is sealed, protected by kill orders, and believed to contain over 600 names. A few have been marked for exterminatus, but many are left untouched, watched, catalogued, feared, because no one yet knows if these divergent cultures are ticking time bombs of psychic collapse or seeds of a new evolutionary path. Both possibilities are terrifying. One theory, whispered among certain radical mechanicus sects, is that the Astronomican itself may be interfering with human development. That it acts as a stabilizing force not just in navigation but in thought, suppressing aberrant neural patterns, dampening emergent psychic harmonics. If this is true, then the farther one gets from the beacon, the more human potential unfolds. Not always for the better, but not always for the worse. There is growing evidence of warp phenomena in these twilight zones that defy categorization. Not daemons, not psychers, not even xenos, just anomalies. Fields of emotional resonance that mirror a planet's collective subconscious. Storms of memory that alter terrain, temporal blooms that restore ancient architecture for hours before it fades again. In one reported case, a ship was grounded on a planet where the crew relived the same hour repeatedly, each time slightly altered, as if the planet were learning from their decisions. The Imperium lacks the tools to interpret these things. The categories break down. Is it heresy to be altered by one's environment? Is it rebellion to evolve in silence? These questions are not hypothetical. They are survival dilemmas for edgeworld governors, rogue navigators, and isolated astropathic choirs trying to reconcile their sanity with what they feel out there. And more than a few have chosen to leave the Imperium not out of hatred, but out of clarity. Perhaps the greatest threat the Edge presents is not destruction, but alternative, that there might be another path. That the human soul, when left alone in the dark long enough, doesn't wither but adapts, changes shape, seeks new gods, or becomes one. This is the nightmare that keeps the Inquisition awake. Not chaos, not xenos, but independence. A form of heresy more insidious than any cult, because it is driven not by temptation but by necessity. And so, the twilight deepens. Between the dying light of the Astronomican and the eternal dark beyond, new truths are being born. Unwritten, unwatched, but not unworthy. They are being forged in silence, and one day they may speak. And if you've made it this far, if this darkness has stirred something in you, made you wonder, made you feel the pull of the edge, then maybe you're one of them. Maybe you're ready. If so, subscribe to this channel and join us as we explore the haunted, the hidden, and the forbidden corners of the Warhammer universe. There's always more beyond the veil.